can take 20 minutes worth before closed session. Take the first speaker still in. What's the wishes of the board?
Are we all going to say the same thing?
You have the right to speak.
Are we all going to say the same thing?
Or,
If there's not anyone going to speak.
well, we can limit it to 20 minutes just because it is public comment. So 20 minutes? All right, we will take 20 minutes worth of public comment. So before the start of the meeting. Yeah, I have Lori Buckland. Welcome, Lori. You and all the speakers will have a 3-minute max, but at 20 minutes after 9, we're going to call this. So, thank you. Welcome to our meeting.
Welcome. Thank you for having me. I just want you to know I'm a principal at Wagner Hole, principal secretary, sorry. I've been with the district for 19 years, and I'm glad to have this opportunity to talk to you today. For the past 7 years, I've been a principal. I've had 3 principals, and I've been working at Wagner Hole. Since April 4th, I've been doing my job and asking to do extra duties out of my classified position. I understand this pandemic is new to all of us, and we all have stepped up, but it's been a little crazy. I have done 13 extra items. I've been a morning gate duty, greeter, student taking temperature. I've been a playground monitor and a cafeteria monitor. When the custodian's not available, called out sick in the morning, I come in, I open the school up, I set up the cafeteria, unlock everything, disarm the buildings. I'm handling all Chromebooks, checking them in, reporting if they're stolen, lost, exchanging them, doing what I can. Hotspots also, extra. When children are out sick, when they get brought into the office being sick, they are, I have to explain to the parents the new procedure about COVID, if it's symptoms of COVID, how they can be gone for 10 days, quarantine, or get the COVID test or get the doctor's note. Parents aren't happy with us on it. They get really upset, but I explain it's for our safety and theirs. But those are samples. Without food service feeding our students, without custodian disinfecting restrooms, classrooms, without transportation making sure students arrive to school, without paras to assist the teachers, and without the secretaries doing the essential tasks. We all the essential workers are important. Classified people should be equal to all. Please, in return, help us be able to live better. Please help us. Thank you, board members.
Thank you, Lori. Sue Fowler.
Good evening, President Freitas, members of the board.
Good evening.
Good evening, and Superintendent Kathy Washer. My name is Sue Fowler. I have been a driver for Lodi Unified for 15 years. I truly love what I do. Driving school buses is my passion. Whew. However, this last year with COVID has been more than challenging. Those of us in transportation were sent outside our classification to different sites. I personally was in technology and loved it. However, some of us that were in other sites, not so much. I am here to ask that you look very carefully at what our bargaining unit is proposing. In 2008, with budget cuts, we lost money, but we fought hard and came back. In 2020, the drivers lost our 20 days for ESY. I have always been modified T+20, and that was taken away without notice of any kind. But we were promised to work June, and then COVID hit. We, the drivers, were all out those 20 days, and that made a huge impact. We also have lost most of our trips due to COVID and lack of drivers. Since coming back to in-person, it has been so crazy, things changing daily and sometimes by the hour. Our workload has increased so much with sanitizing our buses, making sure our kids are sanitized, wearing masks, also making sure our kids are keeping their masks on, and writing names for Z-passes sometimes can be 20, 30 or more kids at a stop. Also temperature checks. Still having to make sure we are on time to our stops. Some drivers are even checking out multiple buses and doing multiple runs. I have been told if I don't like it, I can go elsewhere. Here is the problem with that. I have a lot of years vested here and feel that I have been a very loyal employee. This year has been rough, and all of us in all departments are overworked. I think I speak for most of us when I say the small proposal the district is offering us is more than a slap in the face. I would invite any of you to come and spend the day with us and see what our day consists of. I believe that we are all worth more than what the district is proposing and should be treated as such. We always hear it's fair, it's what's good for the district, but what about us, the employees? What's good for us? Thank you for letting our voices be heard. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Sue. Kimberly Johnson. Hi, Kimberly.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Kimberly. I work in transportation as well. I'd like to speak about the impacts and effects on the pandemic on school operations and services and the relationship between them. Eleanor Roosevelt said, with a new day comes new strength and new thoughts. The new day before us now is dealing with the aftermath of this pandemic, and it so slowly begins to diminish. The new thoughts before us are the harmony and goodwill to all employees, teachers, and staff alike. Use the conduit of equity, sending a message that your leadership is genuine, fair, and appreciated by the teachers and the CSEA members. You, the board, have the power to create a new environment where hostility and division are extinguished and equal feelings of value and worth permeate a new tranquility. This new thought is desperately needed. You have the power to move us not only beyond this pandemic, but forward to a team of camaraderie and solidarity. The district received millions of dollars from the state and federal government as a result of school closures for extended learning to address the effects and impact of students and staff, all staff. We have proposed to the district to provide our unit members and a fair ratio portion of funds provided by the governments. We are each just as much as any individual impacted by COVID as anyone else. We have our personal lives and our families affected. We have increased workloads, safety issues for students and employees, and we as well will be working in the continuation of a COVID environment on the mend. We have been offered 1/5 the amount of compensation. We have withstood the same brunt impact and effects of this pandemic as teachers have. We are not made of steel like a car's engine. We are people made of the same exact components as you. I only ask that you acknowledge the critical grease we supply to this engine of education, to the district, to our students. Once more, we are imploring you to give us our share. Don't just tell us we are worthy, show us. We're not asking for more than our share. We're just asking for our share. Equal ratio. Bring to us a new day of new strength and new thoughts. Bring us a new day. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Kimberly. We have Desiree Weiss. Hi, Desiree.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how about you?
Pretty good.
All right.
Good evening, Dr. Washer, Mr. Freitas, members of the board. My name is Desiree Wise, and I come to you as their CSEA Clerical Negotiator and Negotiations Chair. I wanted to share a couple of things with you prior to going into closed session tonight. First, I am confident you have seen our proposals to LUSD on it, specifically on the impacts and effects of COVID and the full return of students. In the agreement for Safe Schools for All plan, 22.9% of the funds were allocated for CSEA. Although the funds did come to Lodi as AB 86 funds, we believe that 22.9% of the funds equates to about $4 million, which should be allocated for CSEA. So when we craft our proposals, please keep in mind that that is the bare minimum that we think would be offered to our group to mitigate the impacts and effects of the full return of students. Our team really is looking for equity. We would like to come to an agreement that would ensure all of our employees are treated the same, regardless of their classification. Sometimes the verbiage for one agreement, for one group, doesn't necessarily work for the next group. For us, our team looks at the bottom line. What's the total spent? What was the total cost? Please remember that our group is very different than the teachers. We have hundreds of different classifications that include different work years. Our employees work 180, 181, 191, 260 days, just to name a few. Our employees are 8, 6, and 4-hour employees. Please keep our entire group in mind when reviewing our proposals. You really can't pit one classification against another. From our quick calculations, the LEA COVID MOU totals to about $11 million. LUSD's last, best, and final offer to CSEA with regards to full return of students would cost the district roughly a measly $2.1 million. Our team is struggling on how to find the equity in those two offers. Lodi Unified did include a provision for paras who are working with distance learners up to 10 hours a week, similar to the teacher's offer, $25.21 per hour. However, we don't have paras working with distance learners. So how is that helping our paras or benefiting our paras? Our para group is, they don't have time to work with our distance learners currently right now. They're understaffed, and on a daily, they're running about 20 subs short. Another disparity in the proposals is regards to summer school and ESY. Even though the teachers have contractual language in their current contract pertaining to their rate of pay for summer school and ESY, in their COVID MOU, they will be receiving per diem, which is roughly, I mean, in a normal year, it's like $200 or $300 more a day for summer school and ESY per teacher. However, classified hasn't been offered anything extra to work summer school or ESY. So we're having a really hard time, once again, finding the equity in the proposals. Our employees are exhausted, to say the least. Most have been working since last March, cooking, packaging, feeding our students in a manner they've never done before. Maintaining our facilities and disinfecting campuses to ensure safe working environments for students and staff. Our custodians are tired. They have been working overtime and are exhausted. This is another area where routes go uncovered due to lack of subs, which means everyone's picking up more slack on the daily. We have clerical staff that are now greeting students at the gate, taking temperatures, serving as noon duty, helping parents with tech issues, taking care of sick kids in the COVID holding rooms, all while still having to complete their normal monthly duties. Technology has been working feverishly to ensure networks, devices, and all software and platforms are up and running so learning can take place. The morale is low. I don't know if you realize that, but it's very, very low.
Desiree?
Yes.
I'm going to have to cut you off there because that's your 3 minutes and I still have people on the list of when
Sure.
I try to talk.
I just have a little tiny thought and I'm done. Is that okay?
No, I'm sorry. Thank you.
You can have my 3 minutes.
I can have your 3 minutes? Perfect. Thank you.
I'm sorry, that's not the rule, so,
I'll speak when you speak? Okay. I'll wait for your name to be called.
all right. Thank you, Desiree. Tammy Braden, please.
Hello, thank you, board members and
Hello,
Right.
thank you.
Can you hear me? I don't know. I'm a little short. So.
Yeah, you might want to bring it down a little. Very good, thank
Is
you.
that better? Okay. So, the school district cannot function without the CSEA members. I implore you to work with our union to give us the same respect as the teachers. I'm a paraeducator in a SDC preschool class whose classroom is being closed, and we're losing paras because of the unsafe working conditions, or paras being used for lunch and recess duties instead of being able to work in the classroom as they should. It's not possible for social distancing in our special ed classrooms, which is, you know, I mean, you can't, especially with the preschool kids, it's very hard. And we have no subs for when paras are out, and we still don't have proper equipment for the paras to work with our students, especially the distance learning students. We do have paras that only work with distance learners. So how can we properly serve our special need kids if you guys won't properly serve us? Our teachers need our help, and most of us paras spend countless hours in the classroom to help support the teachers over our contract time, which we don't ask for extra pay for, although we should, but we do it because we love our students. And I invite each and every one of you to come and spend a working day, like actually work in the classroom, in our special ed classrooms, especially in the preschool classrooms. So you can see that it's a dangerous and unsafe working situation. Is we have runners, we have spitters, we have fighters, we have kickers, and without enough support staff in the classrooms to help with this. I know we were promised at the beginning of the school for computers and equipment, but a lot of us still haven't received that equipment. So I'm asking for all the paras, could you please help support us and support your CSEA members, and please think about how you're affecting us. As Desiree said, our morale is low. People want to leave. They're tired of having to work in situations like this. They don't want to be here anymore. They're tired. We're exhausted every day. We can't continue like this. So please, show us some respect and give us what we deserve too.
And I'm sorry, I mispronounced your name. It's Tamathy, is that correct? Is that
That's close.
Okay.
Close enough.
Sorry about that. All right. Thank you. We have Beth Porscheller. Beth?
She said I can have her 3 minutes.
You know,
I just have a
would
quick thought,
love,
Mr.
I would
Freitas.
love to have you do that. Unfortunately, that's,
It didn't say on the agenda that we were limited to only 20 minutes for public comment. I just have a short thought to close my speech is all.
I'll give her 3 minutes. She says, I'm here, bro.
all right, Desiree.
I appreciate it, Mr. Freitas. Thank you very much.
Just in closing, I was going to share with you that the morale is low. It's very, very low. Many are feeling overworked and underappreciated. The $130 million in funds that LUSD has received to address the impacts and effects of the pandemic on students and staff. That means us classified workers too. You have an opportunity to not only tell us thank you, but show us how much that you thank us. Without us, we don't have students in seats in the classroom, we don't have students to feed, we have custodians that have to dump the trash and clean and Clorox 360, so without us, the district can't function. We want to come to work, we want to enjoy this place. Show us, please, that you appreciate us. Please provide direction to your bargaining team to bring a proposal that is fair and equitable. Our teams look forward to a successful next bargaining session. Thank you for your time.
Very good. That concludes our 20-minute period, and the board will adjourn to closed session. Thank you.
You guys can come work in the classrooms for a week and see how it is. You guys are forgetting too much. Not a day, you have a day, but maybe a week.
That's what makes you our favorite.
So I get how this is. George asks for hand sanitizer, and there's hand sanitizer everywhere. Okay? George asks for water. Everybody gets water.
What would you like, Mr. Kennedy?
I want a donut.
How about some chips with the vending machine?
My body's a temple. Temple of doom. I heard that.
Yeah, firemen just go hang out at the grocery store.
Yeah, we just hang out at the grocery store. People, oh, I gotta buy your food. No. We buy our own. Oh.
Staring at blank screen. Cam,
Yeah.
blank screen.
I'm gonna use it. You guys want to do something about
Oh, that's because I'm on the
load
road.
or something.
Operators? I don't care. Are you gonna use these machines?
Yes.
All right, you need some help. I do that.
$500,000. Come to your board, leave the district.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Stay warm.
The tank top.
First time I ever did.
Oh, you hit at the bar.
Remember that, I remember that.
What was his name? He was actually a real nice guy.
Oh, he was a very nice guy. Staples. I've talked to him several times.
Have you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Scott and Jeff, coated ties look very nice.
I know, we didn't get the memo.
Much appreciated, Dr. Sally.
Unauthorized action.
They just want you to go home, Gary.
Okay.
What do you want me to do? I put on microphones on, do you know that? It's like being old.
They should understand the rules.
Right? Drive the car, pay the bill, carry the bag.
You should.
Shut up.
It is, absolutely.
Is that in this board? Because over here never has problems.
Never ever.
No, literally, their computers are always up and working. It's always over there.
It's a prohibited subject. Okay. So can I share your number with Scott? Steve's the field director for Supplemental.
Yeah, we do.
You got what you know.
Person,
Yeah.
I don't really know what he is. I think it was
Yeah. Yeah.
working until the 8-ball came out. Sometimes the 8-ball works as good, sometimes it works as bad.
Big print.
All these things that can't read. Guess what that's called? A joke. You know? Yeah, I'm right. How many people in this country? Businesses. Just, yeah. That thing, you know, it's,
If I'm sitting anywhere, I'm going to go take a seat next to him.
whenever he's going on the phone, he said, we want locals, our estimates, yeah. Yeah, makes sense. Done. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. It's hard. Yeah. And then. Yes, so it would get
Anyone mind if I use this chair over here, start the meeting, while they work on this?
Go for it.
All right.
You want me to give you
Bring your gavel, or you want to bang the gavel?
Sure. Yeah.
Almost. You want to give them like,
Oh, my God.
Hello.
don't do that. Okay. All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and call tonight's meeting to order. Welcome to our May 18th meeting. We're having some technical problems with my computer, so I'm going to enjoy the table over here with Mr. Khan for just a little bit. Let's go ahead. Roll call. We have all 7 members present. And we also would like people to be aware that we are using the world's greatest owl tonight. And because of that, please keep your voices down because the owl will pick up texture noises and it will mess up the camera. So but since there are, I think, 8 of us in the room tonight, we should probably be okay. Let's raise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Hebley, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Sir.
Ready?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Everly. Very nice job. All right, report out in closed session. In conference with legal counsel on existing litigation. Mr. Nava motion and Ms. Vice President McFarland second, and the board approved the settlement agreement on OAH case number 2021-04-0004 by the vote of 7-0. Also, before we start tonight's meeting, Jimmy Yin was a 2015 graduate of Lodi Unified near high school. Several of us board members were there at that graduation. Last week, he tragically lost his life in the line of duty as a police officer for the City of Stockton Police Department. Can we please take a brief moment of silence for him, his wife, and his children who attend Lodi schools? Thank you. We have 2 items on tonight's discussion, or 3 items, I believe. First, we have well, I tell you what, anyone object if we go to the funnest one first? Can we jump ahead to OAI3, ratification of the tentative agreement? Right? Mr. McGilligan. Dr. Washer.
Thank you, Mr. Freitas. Members of the board, the agreement is here for your approval. We greatly appreciate the work from the LEA bargaining team and our staff who were able to come to this agreement, and greatly appreciate the speediness in which LEA was able to get the ratification process done, to be here tonight.
This is absolutely fantastic. Ms. Oregon?
I want to thank the board, good evening, President Curtis, members of the board, Dr. Washer. We want to thank the board for bringing this agreement where members are happy and ratified this. We look forward to you ratifying this also. Thank you very much for the time and diligence on it.
Very nice. Thank you, Ms. Oregon, and thank you, LEA. Comments from the board?
I move to approve.
Second.
All right, so I have Mr. Knaxad with the motion, Mr. Porter with a second. Any other comments from the board?
Mr. Freitas?
Yes, Mr. Neal.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. Glad this is finally coming in. We originally offered a 3.26 COLA back in January of 2020. That was coupled with 2 other years as well, for the next 2 years to give the COLA. I wish we'd had something like that on this. That way we wouldn't have to come back. I think that is the way that we eventually need to go. It's trying to do multi-years based on the COLA. We offered that, for some reason it didn't work out. It was rejected, I guess. So we need to think about that. Also, I want to make it clear that it is my intention that all of our bargaining units get this same kind of raise. And I think that's the intention of the rest of the board as well. I want to make sure that everybody understands that. And that's all I've got to say.
All of our bargaining units and then some, right, Mr. Neely?
Yes, sir. And
Very
then
good.
some. You're right, and then some.
Thank you, Mr. Neely, for those comments. Other comments from the board? Well, I would join with my colleagues' comments. Thank you, LEA. You do an amazing job, and it's very much an honor for us to be ratifying this here tonight and going forward with our fantastic relationship teaching our kids. So I'll go ahead and call for the vote. Mr. Knaxad.
Aye.
Mr. Everly.
Aye.
Mr. Neely.
Aye.
Mr. Nava.
Aye.
Clerk of the board, Mr. Porter.
Aye.
Vice President McFarland.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Item OAI3, the tentative agreement with Lodi Education passes 7-0. Congratulations.
Mr. Freitas, point of order.
Yes.
I apologize. Mr. Khan, item OAI2, I believe needed to come first.
Thank you, Dr. Washer, President Freitas, members of the board. This is the AB 1200 requirement for public disclosure. It is listed on your agenda item as an info action. It does not need to be voted upon if the board does not wish to. It is merely an opportunity to inform the board and the public prior to the approval of the TA or tentative agreement. I believe it's been accomplished just by being published. It merely, the item merely shows the previous salary scales upon which this bargaining agreement or this negotiated contract change is based upon, and it shows that the cost of the agreement versus the 18-19 salary scales is about 5.1 million a year for teachers, only a total of 10.2 million since this agreement encompasses 2 years. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but again, the board does not need to take action on this.
And Mr. Khan, just want to make sure we're okay with the order of events for the evening.
I think that's fine. Again, I believe the public disclosure was made the moment the agenda item was published on Thursday afternoon.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make this official, and I move that we approve AB 1200. That way we have no questions whatsoever.
Thank you, Mr. Nowak, for your motion on OAI2. Thank you, Mr. Heberly, for your second. Other comments from the board? Other comments from the public? We'll go ahead and we'll do an electronic vote then on this matter.
Awesome.
I got nothing.
Go to the dunce's chair next to the winner, right there.
I got nothing. Maybe that's it. He said he would take care of everything while I was gone.
Just need to get you out of the chair, Mike. So, item OAI2 has passed 7-0. All right. Well, congratulations, board, and congratulations, Leah, once again. We're very excited for all that. I usually like to do some introductions. We're joined tonight by our assistant, Valerie McPhee. Thank you, Valerie, for coming and running the show behind the scenes. And Michael has been doing quite the job. He is our technician extraordinaire, and he's being assisted by DJ. So thank both of you. And Michael is rethinking his job and after the night that he's had. But we really appreciate the three of you here tonight and helping out, as with everybody who's joining our meeting. Okay, now that we got the fun stuff out of the way, we have the real fun stuff, which is our discussion item on the Lcap. And Dr. Washer, we have Dr. Solly.
Yes, Mr. Freitas, members of the board, this is our ongoing conversation about the Lcap. We've shared it with you at previous board meetings, shared the input that we received from the public. So this is our next step in order to be able to continue the process and bring you a final version next month. So Dr. Solly.
Thank you, Dr. Washer. Good evening, Dr. Solly.
Good evening, President Freitas, Dr. Washer, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to share this with you. The Lcap, again, I want to reiterate, and forgive me if this is too elementary, but I think it's worth stating. It's really our spending plan, our spending map of our LCFF funds from the state, as well as our categorical funds, which are attached to a federal addendum, which we'll go over this evening. The goals and actions address board goals and actions, as well as requirements of funding sources, such as categorical fundings. I mentioned last time we met that and really at this stage we're following the CDE timelines for approval of this, but any changes to an Lcap really should come 6 to 7 months, 8 months prior to this, but following state guidance, we're in the place we are. But I only state that to emphasize that if the board is seeking to make some major changes in our Lcap, it would be recommended that those be planned for next year, due to the fact that the vast majority of our funding is tied to either staffing or restricted funds such as special ed and such. And so it's really a forward-thinking document, but given the timelines the CDE follows, and we bring this to you in June, and by CDE guidance, along with our final budget at the end of June, this is where we're in the place where we are. So, however, we do have an opportunity still to make some modifications. There are still some places to adjust and adapt in some areas. Portions of the Lcap are not required. They are self-imposed, for that matter, in the goals of the board and such. So if we make changes, we can do so provided we provide the flexibility within the existing budget. One of the items we have done that too is, which Dr. Seha will mention briefly, is in the terms of adding intervention teachers, which we've done through some flexibility of funding within the Lcap. But rather than bring this bring it right to the point, I want to call up Dr. Seha
And he's going to start off with the federal addendum, which is categorical funding piece, and then he'll go into the more detailed actions. The document, as you've, I'm sure, seen, is 128 pages, so we're happy to go page to the page you want to address. But we've also provided this week the summary that was provided at the last meeting, which was color-coded based upon funding categories and requirements. So, Dr. Seha, if you'll take over.
Hi, Dr. Seha. Welcome to our meeting.
Thank you, President Freitas, Dr. Washer, members of the board. As Dr. Solly mentioned, we'd like to start with reviewing the Lcap Federal Addendum. So if we can open up the second attachment, please. So this document that we're pulling up was last approved in 2019. The Lcap Federal Addendum is meant to supplement the Lcap and ensure we meet the plan provisions of the Every Student Succeeds Act. In this plan, we outline how we will use federal grant funds in Title I, Title II, Title III, and Title IV. We also go over how we'll identify poverty levels at our school sites, which will be used for inclusion in the Title I program. So I'd like to just go over some of the main changes in the document. If you can scroll down to page 7, please. Oh, that page right there. So as some of you may be aware, in these past few years, we've had many more schools participating in the Community Eligibility Provision Program. That means that every student on campus receives a free meal. The way that is determined is by using what's called an identified student percentage, and you look at students that are automatically qualify for a free meal. Once that reaches a certain threshold, the entire school can receive a free meal. Due to the changes in identification for free and reduced meals, we've had to make some adjustments on how we identify Title I schools. So whereas before we used free and reduced meal applications, now we're using the identified student percentage, which is the students that automatically qualify for free meals for participation in SNAP, in TAMP, and various other programs that automatically get them a free meal. We use that percentage, and we use what's called a multiplier, which we multiply that percentage by 1.6 to get an approximation of the free and reduced meal percentage. And that's how we now identify schools for Title I. And we still have the threshold of 75% or higher. Those schools are included in the Title I program. All right, and if you can scroll down to, on the next few pages, we outline how we spend our Title I funds, which are meant for our low-income students. Then Title II, keep scrolling. Title II is professional development, which we can provide for our teachers to help improve student outcomes by raising the quality of their instruction. Then Title III is specific funding geared towards English learners. And in those areas, most of the spending remain the same. If we can scroll down. To Title IV. Which is the last page in the document. So Title IV Part A is another area where there have been some changes. Keep scrolling down. On this area, we can allocate funds towards supporting a well-rounded education. You can see there we're supporting STEM resources. We're also partnering with community-based organizations to provide mentoring, tutoring, and other supports. We're also providing advanced placement testing fees for low-income students, and supporting some of the college and career counseling, and those opportunities to help our low-income students obtain financial aid. The next area is supporting safe and healthy students. So in this area, we're providing some additional training for PBIS. Also, we have some staffing that's funded out of Title IV, our PBIS coach, and we're also providing social emotional learning supports in this area. And the last area in Title IV is effective use of technology, and some of the resources we provide here are to support our one-on-one take-home devices and also to provide additional STEM resources. So I'd be happy to take any questions regarding the Lcap Federal Addendum.
Let me know, Dr. Seance, should we keep going all the way through this and ask questions all at once?
So what Dr. Solly and I planned on doing was covering the Lcap Federal Addendum and then going into the Lcap. So it's really board preference if you want to ask questions specific to the Lcap Federal Addendum, or if you'd like to wait until after we also cover the Lcap piece. And
you know what, since I think there's going to be overlap in the questions between the federal and the overall,
Let me ask a procedural question.
Sure, Mr. Neely.
But I want to make sure that and it kind of ties into both reports.
Yes.
Okay, we're talking about the extended learning opportunity and also the other money that we're getting. The yellow is just only a portion of the money that's coming in. And as one of my colleagues said in CSBA, it's not extra money, it's money needed to offset problems that we've had with this. So I want to make sure that that money, and Dr. Washington, I want to make sure we're all on the same sheet of music here, that money is not reflected in the LCAP. The LCAP is only for LCFF funds, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So the LCAP outlines our LCFF funding, and then the LCAP Federal Addendum outlines how we spend our federal grant funds to supplement the LCFF spending.
That's going to be a change too, because the federal grant funds are going to skyrocket, as I understand.
The titles. He's referring to.
Yeah, I'm referring to the titles.
Yes. Thank you very much. That's all.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Neely. So why don't we proceed all the way through, and I think that way questions could be answered globally as opposed to piecemeal.
All right, sounds great.
Thank you.
So previous board direction related to the LCAP, and if we can close out this attachment, please. Go ahead and open up the LCAP document. The first one, yeah. All right, so previous board direction was to continue the majority of the 1920 LCAP actions. There was also additional direction to provide supplemental interventions. So I'll be going over briefly what additional supports we'll be providing in supplemental interventions. So in action 1.5 in the LCAP, in that action we provide supplemental interventions for K-12. For that area, we're looking to provide additional interventions, and in addition to that, it's not included in the LCAP document, but we are also able to provide additional interventions through our CARES and through our Expanded Learning Opportunity Grant. In action 1.17, which is related to our restricted federal and state funds, we did add an additional 6.0 FTE reading intervention in that action. The other area board gave direction to look at increasing was social emotional learning supports. Some of the actions that we adjusted to include these supports were action 1.12 to provide social emotional learning supports through counseling services. We did absorb 2.7 FTE counselors formerly funded through SACE. So a grant funding ended. We didn't increase the FTE, but we absorbed the FTE from a previous grant funding into the LCFF funding. Another area where we increased was in action 3.1, providing community liaison support to all sites to bridge communication between home and school. Some of you may be aware, we had LCSSP grant funding before that funded community liaisons that provided tutoring, mentoring, and communication between home and school. That grant funding also ended, and we are looking at absorbing that FTE in the Lcap as well in Action 3.1. And the last action we're looking to include in the 2021-2022 Lcap is Action 3.3, which is related to continuing implementation of school-wide positive behavior intervention systems and supports, otherwise known as PBIS. And we're looking to provide follow-up training and other supports at school sites. The budgeted amount for that action is $20,000. So those are the main highlights of the changes that we made. We can go through other additional actions or questions that the board may have. The other piece that Dr. Solly spoke about earlier was the Lcap Notes with details, which was the other document. So if we could close out this document, please, and open up the third one. So as all of you are aware, our Lcap actions are written in such a way where they provide us flexibility and outline in broad terms the actions that we're implementing. I know board was interested in obtaining additional detail as to the specific actions we were supporting in our Lcap. So this document provides additional detail regarding the FTE and various programs that we support through our LCFF funds. Happy to take any questions, or if you want to go through any of these actions in greater detail, or Dr. Solly, would you like to add anything?
No, as I said, this was provided earlier, and I'm assuming you've all had a chance to digest, but we're happy to entertain any single ones. But again, the areas to work on if the board wishes to make additions or modifications to this Lcap that we're looking at, the unshaded areas or areas that are not connected to requirements or staffing or changes that would have really impacts that should have been addressed many months ago. There would certainly be a challenge to pivot on some of these at this date, but there is potential opportunity to do some pivoting at that point. But they would be primarily the unshaded areas or actions.
Dr. Washer?
No further comments, it's up to the board for questions.
Mr. Chairman.
With Dr. Washer, Dr. Solly, Dr. Sayad, thank you for that presentation. This is an amazing amount of work, and obviously, one, not only is it required by the state, that it helps a lot of people in our district in many great ways, and I know that when you sign up to work in a district, you don't say, boy, I'd like to pull over thousands and thousands of pages, but I do appreciate the work that's in this, and I'll go ahead and put it out to comments from the board. Mr. Nava?
Yes, the same comments that you're making, Mr. Freitas. I want to thank Dr. Sally and Dr. Seha for all that work you've been doing. Gosh, I like the color coded here because I'm very, I can't see very well at my age, but I can see the pink and the blue and all that kind of stuff, and kind of transform back and forth. So very nice to do that. Plus the 130 or 28 pages, 38 pages. I read them all, by the way, so I had no questions. Thank you.
And Mr. Nava and I, our comments are the same because great minds. Great minds. There it is. Other comments from the board? Mr. Neely?
Well, Mr. Go first, yes. On the federal side, when they're talking about the Title I identifiers for determining whether a school is Title I or not, you said there was a kind of a little bit of a change on that. So what is the percentage of free and reduced lunch if that's still up to determine?
So yes, thank you for the question. Yeah, so there was a change to the way we're identifying school sites. We're now using the identified student percentage, which are the students that qualify automatically for a free meal, and we're using the 1.6 multiplier to obtain an approximation of the free and reduced meal percentage. We still have the 75% threshold, where if school sites are above the 75% threshold, they qualify for Title I funding. If they're below the 75% threshold, they do not qualify for Title I funding.
Mr. Haverly, members of the board, if I could add, our goal was to keep as many current Title I schools continuing with Title I as possible. So that is why we picked the option that we did there. A different format would have eliminated some schools.
And this is well beyond Lodi Unified, but one of the things I always thought was inherently unfair is that there are a lot of non-Title I schools that absolutely have Title I qualified children in it. So there's really nothing, it's like a light switch, it's either on or it's off. It's 75% or it isn't. You get money or you don't. Am I kind of encapsulating that correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
See a bunch of heads nodding. Yeah, I don't know, I just think that that's kind of too bad of how that works. But you would think you would get some proportion of the percentage that you have so that those kids could get the services that they need. Okay, also, question number 2 is that you were running down kind of a list of changes, and some of them in fact were increases, but a lot of them seemed like they were just absorbing it into the LCAP, basically changing funding source?
Yes, that's correct.
Is he nodding?
Yes.
Mobilization?
Yes, we've, thank you for the question. The grant that closed, that had been funding some counselors and some community liaisons, we didn't want to lose those positions, so we looked carefully at what was in our LCAP, and under our categorical funding, our Title I funding, for a period of the last 3 years or so, there has been an amount of carryover that we looked at as a source that we could tap into. And also looking forward, it doesn't appear in the near short term that categorical funding is likely to be reduced under this current administration. So we had a conference and discussion about is it safe to shift some of this staffing to that Title I category, and we felt that it was a safe bet that we wouldn't be getting ourselves in a position where we have staff and we can't fund them long term. So that is true, and that we did. It wasn't actually an addition, but it was actually a preventative move against losing staff.
And it's not like that was a criticism, it was just something I noticed going through this. We're just realigning the funding. One of the things that I'm concerned about is that let's say that we determine mid-school year or budget year that we really need more custodians, more counselors. Would we then somehow get them through LCAP, or would we fund that in a different way?
For that particular year, you would need to seek some other funding sources, maybe funds that weren't being expended for some reason or other. But really, the real solution to that would be kind of what I led with here, with is planning for the next LCAP somewhere between start of school and the holiday season-ish, because those are then we can make modifications to staffing levels moving forward in a timeline that would be sustainable and workable under bargaining agreements and employment laws and such.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when you started, the first thing that came to mind was, it's just like, phew, the school year ended. Well, we're already hip deep in planning for next school year because we get our, let's say, high school, we get course catalogs out in December. January, February, they start picking classes and on 4 months down the road. And we're trying to get our numbers for elementary to see where those numbers are going to lay. So, yeah, we're going to have to get right on this then.
And Mr. Heberly, that's actually a very good analogy, because in order to get your course catalog established, that needs to be happening in the fall, because catalog gets published in spring and students plan for the next year. And if I had my druthers, I think that the Lcap should follow somewhat of a similar timeline, but we're just following the CDE guidance on this.
And as the examples that I brought up about the custodial and maintenance, and also about counselors, one of the things I was concerned about is that this coming school year, I think pretty much everybody sees that there may be additional needs for students for counseling services. And I just want to make sure that we're not locking ourselves out of increasing that if we need to. The other portion is custodial and maintenance. Mid-year, we're going to have new facilities coming online. And the last thing we want to do is skimp on maintaining those facilities and so forth. And I'm looking at Mr. Pond. So that I think that we really need to make sure that things are ready for kids, they're clean, they're maintained. That in itself tells the student that we, the adults, are ready for them. And then again, you know, with all the happily new construction going on, I don't want any of our facilities being neglected by maintenance or custodial also. And then of course too, we want to make sure that we keep everything as clean as possible at the start of the school year to boost confidence in that, you know, we are doing our part. We are then basically locked out of Lcap, but of course, like you said, there's other funds that Mr. Connor will tell us about that we can buy extra people. As he hangs his head down and says, anyway, we've had the conversation. I'm joking, but then I'm serious. You know, we do need to take care of that. And that's all I have for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Neely. Mr. Heberly.
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Freitas. If I could add, Mr. Haberly brought up counseling. That may be an area we look at for expansion. I know at the elementary level, there's been some concern expressed by staff. There are only 13 elementary counselors serving 32 schools. So for the upcoming school year, some of the counselors would be assigned to 4 school sites. So that may be an area if the board seeks to look at adding additional FTE at the elementary counselor level, that may be something that we look at either with the additional one-time federal funds we're receiving or through our LCFF funding.
Yeah, and I guess to repeat my point is that, you know, it takes a positive adult interaction to get our kids to where they need to go, for whatever reason. And that could be in the form of, you know, teachers or paras or vice principals or counselors, and to be determined later, obviously, but, you know, we need adult bodies to make the things roll.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Heberly. Mr. Neely.
Thank you, Mr. Freitas. Michael, have you got those slides? I'd like slide number 2, please. Next one. Okay, right here. This is a little graphic of where our Title I schools stand as compared to our non-Title I schools. If you see the list, you'll find that there's not a Title I school that is higher than the non-Title I school anywhere. And to my way of thinking, we need to correct this. And the LCAP is part of that. So I'd like you to explain to me specifically what we have in the LCAP that's geared toward correcting that inequity. We start with that.
Mr. Neely, the component that addresses our categorical funding, Title 1, 2, 3, is earmarked specifically for addressing those particular schools. In addition, what you hear of as unduplicated students in our LCAP, we get a base amount of funding per student, and then we get an additional allocation for our unduplicated students who are the low SES, EL student, and or foster youth homeless. We get somewhat additional funding there. Now, we are not required to allocate all of that money specifically, head for that student, but that's where the intention is, and where we do earmark those funds to serve those students. So it would be found in the categorical component of the LCAP as well as in the supplemental concentration funds within the LCAP.
Okay, now the supplemental and concentration grants, those are part of the LCAP.
They are part of the LCAP, yes.
And I'm just trying to lay some groundwork here. So, and like Mr. Heavily brought up, which is a very good point, we have schools out there that may have 70% free and reduced that don't get any extra funds. They could have 74% and not get any extra funds, and they could have 76% and get extra funds. So the question is, are we just giving the money to the local schools and letting them decide how that Title I money is spent?
Well, they do get oversight over with their school site council, the allocation of some of those funds. There's also addition in the LCAP. One of the items is what we call SAS funds, school assistance support funds. Those are guided mainly by the school site councils as well.
Right.
So there's a yes and a no in that answer. Depends on.
I got to tell you, I'm asking questions that I know the answer to, and I'm just trying to get it out here so that we can discuss it as a group. This is something that this board needs to discuss, and the only place that we can discuss it is right out here. This is not a closed session area. We've got to do something to get that a little bit more equitable. For those of you who can't read it, the blue line are those students, the percent that are below standard. So our Title I schools, you can see how much over here on this side, how much higher, there's almost about 68%, 67% of students in Title I schools are functioning below state standards. Now over here, only 49%. So you can see that we've got an incredible difference here. It's right there. We have, one of our goals is to ensure all students read at grade level by the end of third grade and maintain strong literacy skills throughout their education. I would say that we're not meeting that goal. I would say we're not even coming close to that goal. Now we can sit here, we can look at it year after year after year, or we can take affirmative action to try to straighten this thing out. And it's going to require a lot more than just giving schools money. There's a lot of other things that need to go in here. And I'm going to talk about that later when we talk about the ELO and some other grants. The concentration and supplemental grants. Now, are we allocating that proportional to the number of free and reduced in each school?
It doesn't work out to a proportionality exactly. It's not a requirement of the funding, but we do earmark, for example, bilingual aids to those sites. They generally have high EL populations as one example.
Right. What are we going to do about this? This is our planning session here. What are we going to do about this?
Mr. Neely, members of the board, I think we need to go back to a few years ago, when we were targeting services to specific schools. If you recall, we had identified some
target schools, 2 or 3 that we were going to focus on. And I think that gave us some good momentum, but of course, life changed. Give you an example, just some reminders. We had increased counseling services at a couple of our Title I schools. If you talk to the principals of those schools, and I think that they have shared at a board meeting in the past about how those services have impacted students. We also increased vice principal support at a couple Title I schools and intervention teacher support, and most recently the decision to add 6 additional intervention teachers. So that type of focus, I think we need to get back to that. We did what we could, but as you know, it was a drop in the bucket. And to make an impact on a site or a couple of sites, we really need to focus on those sites, pour resources, identify the needs, not spend money just to spend money, but identify what the needs are and really support those school sites. And it's not just money. There are, there's other things. There's or that wouldn't cost as much money. There's training. There's parent communication, outreach, and interaction. There's those other kinds of things as well. So I would suggest that, I'm not saying go back to what we did before, but continue, enhance, and improve what we did before in really targeting on some schools and identifying critical needs.
Thank you, Dr. Washer.
George, just one quick question.
Sure.
When I look at that, I like to figure some things out. That's very good. What are the numbers on that in terms of students? When we look at Title I versus non-Title I, what's the numbers?
There's so much more that we need to do, and that's one of them right there.
Right.
All right, now, go to the slide before this one.
I'm not trying to be rude, I just try.
No, I know you're not, and I understand that. They're good questions, because I was going over the data today.
Right.
We test 3rd through 8th and then 11th grade.
Right.
Out of that, there was about 15,000 students that were tested. Okay, so that's the number that we're looking at. These are the percentage by our 4 major ethnic groups, largest ethnic groups, and where they land. These are just basic things, and there's so much more. And I would love to sit down with Uwe and tell him what I'd like to see, and I welcome you to be part of that as well. And because one of the things, full disclosure here, Dr. Washer, Mr. Freitas, and myself have been attending an equity class put on by CSBA. We've got 1 or 2 more classes. No, 1. Just 1? They talk about being data-driven.
Right.
And we need that data. Now, just because we don't have data for last year, this one's going to be kind of, it doesn't get any better. Over the last year and a half, it hasn't gotten any better. So we're going to go with what we got here and start working with it. Now, Dr. Washer, what I would like to see is an actual plan developed. What we're going to do. And I've got some things. This weekend I was at the CSBA delegate convention. And some of the things that they're doing is that they're Title I schools. Every school has a wellness center. They're doing things like putting services for low income on the school sites where people can come in. There's extra counseling. They're partnering with nonprofits. They're partnering with other government agencies, and they're looking at the whole family. It's tough to teach a kid to read when he's worried about what he's going to eat, or she's going to worry about what they're going to eat that night. They're worried about going home to a house that 3 families live in. There's all kinds of problems. We've got to look at the whole situation. And Dr. Washer, we need something. We need a plan. Not just, we can do this, we can do that. It has to be written. And then from there, it's a start. We'll take it, we'll start working with it, we'll make changes as we go through it, and we pass it on to the next board, and we just keep on. That's unacceptable. And as long as we don't do anything, we're just saying, okay, well, we'll put that down there that every child can read by the end of third grade. And it's a great goal. That's a fantastic goal. We just got to get to it. And what we're doing is not getting us there.
George, let me interject a little bit, because we've been through this before in study sessions.
We have.
As the poverty of the individuals, the single family homes, single parent homes, that's a big factor involved. My gosh, we've got to talk about the parental support of these youngsters that are going to school. We talk about a kid that, they can't read. The parents can't read.
Right.
So how are we gonna do this? We need a plan, is right.
That's
We
right.
need a plan to get these people educated somehow or tutored somehow in order for us to succeed in that matter.
And we also need things like extended daycare for these kids. Because the more time like you were saying, the more time we can keep them in contact with an adult who can help them learn how to read, learn their ABCs, learn all that, the better off that we are. And it's time that we start that now. Okay, I'm not wanting to change the Lcap. I understand that discussion this weekend too, because the state hasn't even got their budget done yet. And here they want us to have ours done, which is based on theirs. So that doesn't make any sense. But we have, so we can't change the Lcap. I get that. We've got these other grants coming up that we can use, and we need to move forward.
We have
And I'm
some
going to talk about this
opportunities.
at every board meeting. So I'm sorry, lengthens it out. My gosh, we've got to do something. That's all I got.
Very nice. Thank you, Mr. Neely. Other comments from the board?
Let me ask a question about this. What subjects in school are these?
This is only ELA.
Oh, okay.
This says up here at the top, ELA.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and the math is even worse.
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
That's okay.
if you take the math out and separate it, those would be
Yeah.
way different.
I go with ELA a lot because if you can't read our math text, you're going to have a hard time learning that concept as well. As far as, and I did have the percentages, anyway, African Americans about 7%, Hispanic somewhere in the 41, I think, percent. Is that correct? I'm not sure about Asian. I can't remember. 18?
Sorry about that.
Is higher than 18?
Higher.
Okay. White is about 19%. But that's the percentage of those. And these, they break it down by grade level, and then they have them all. So this is inclusive of all. 3 through 8 and up.
All right. Other questions from the board? Questions from the public?
Thank you, President Freitas. A question through you to Dr. Sully or Dr. Seha. I did not catch the change in the free and reduced lunch form being something different. How, if I can, how are we gathering that information for those programs? Is it the free and reduced lunch form, or is it something else that the parents have to sign up for? Because I know that was a goal, was to make sure that we got those forms at the beginning of the year filled out right away. But on that list, those looked like programs. I don't remember those being on forms before. It could have changed.
So maybe I can answer your question. It sounded like Dr. Seah said is that we take the response on the forms and then we use a multiplier to increase that number. Is that fair enough? Or?
And Nutrition Services works with various data sources, and they automatically identify students who are participating in qualifying programs. We do still collect the alternative income information form for Lcap purposes because we receive additional supplemental and concentration funds from the state for income information. We do collect the alternative income forms still from all schools that are not participating in the free and reduced, or that are not submitting free and reduced meal applications. So at all of our school sites, students would either fill out free and reduced meal applications if they're not a community eligibility provision school, and at our community eligibility provision schools, the students would be filling out an alternative income form, and that's used for local control funding formula purposes.
So it sounds like Michelle's many sources, including the lunch forms.
So, food services is, from what I gather, is gathering most of that information. And families have to provide that, or is there another source they can get that in case because I know that was an issue in the past, was some families did not want to fill out the form. How do we make sure that we're not dropping any?
So the alternative income forms that we're collecting at our community eligibility provision sites are now only used for LCFF funding. They are no longer used for Title I identification. For Title I identification, we are now using the identified student percentage, and I don't know, Leonard, if you want to add any additional information as to how Nutrition Services collects that information, but I believe they work with various data sources to identify students in CalPAS.
President Freitas.
Of course.
So the identifier that Dr. Seha is referring to is called direct certification. These are students that are receiving some type of benefit from another agency in the county or state. So there's a database that directly certifies those students. For the purposes of title and Dr. Seha and Dr. Sally's work, they have chosen to use a formula based on that 1.6 factor of the direct certs. It is not legal to request or require a free and reduced meal application anytime a child is being given a free meal, which is occurring, I believe, at 22 of our school sites right now, under what Dr. Seha mentioned as the CEP, or Community Eligibility Program. So we do use the alternative income source at those sites. We use the free and reduced meal application at other sites, and the aggregate of all those things results in our 70-71% free and reduced. So we are still using.
Okay, thank you. That makes more sense as to where that would come from. A couple of questions. One, in the LCAP, the change that we saw in adding, we believe, looking at data, as Mr. Neely has pointed out, the goal of reading by third grade is important. And we've mentioned over the past couple of years money towards intervention. The 6 intervention teachers at 6 different sites was something new to us that came out that we were a little surprised about. We hope that there is ongoing training and looking ongoing and reflecting on the programs to, as the chart, this chart and the previous chart that were up, you can see there is a distinct difference, and we know that part of the Title I funds are taken off the top of the pot and given to non-Title I sites to help meet some of those needs for intervention teachers at those sites. But I think we really need to look at the data, reflect on the programs and the effectiveness of those programs that we have to bridge this gap. When you see the literacy and the gap in Title I's, we know we need to meet it in some of the things that, like Mr. Nava said, single families. And we know that a child who doesn't have dental care or can't see, doesn't have access to glasses, they can't read because they're worried about, their tooth. And when we had dental care on sites, we did have those services before at some of our Title I sites. That does address the whole child, so we would hope that we would really take hard looks at what we are doing to develop a plan to bridge the gaps. I mean, some of these are just astronomical. So
we hope that we do look closer at some of the data and what we're doing at sites to develop a plan to bridge that. We also think they're within this LCAP addressing, we know that COVID's not going away, addressing the sub-issue for teachers, but also for custodians and counselors, and making sure that our sites are clean and healthy as we start the new year. So addition to that, I don't know if any change this year, but as we go forward, we know it's not going away. So how do we maintain that sense? Especially with next year having our students all live in person, what are we doing with those students that have to be quarantined next year? We haven't bridged that topic. Are we going to be doing hybrid still with them? So we know it's a lot of questions, and looking at that data, we appreciate the hard luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Other comments from the public? Do you have any online comments? Very good. Dr. Washer, what's the next step in this?
Mr. Freitas, members of the board, the next step will be to bring this back to you again in June. We have a public hearing, and then it will come back again for your approval.
Very good. All right, looking forward to it. Thank you. Thank you. So, on our action items and report items, we have our expanded learning opportunity grant. That is a report and an action item tonight.
Thank you, President Freitas, Dr. Washer, members of the board. We have a brief presentation here, about a half a dozen slides to go through as an executive summary on the expanded learning grant. This is a subset, again, not to be too elementary, I needed to cover this a little bit last week, but again, for repeating and reminding purposes, this is a subset of AB 86 of the state legislature and government provided last spring to allocate for Lodi's purposes approximately $19 million under the expanded learning grant, and then there's another $9 or so million under the in-person instruction grant. The in-person instruction grant doesn't require a plan as this component does, so we are providing this tonight. There are 7 allowable uses. We have written this in such a way that we are requesting of the state approval to access all allowable uses, provided we can come to agreements with bargaining members, with consultants, with community groups, in that the timing of this, again, is a bit of a challenge because we need to have this approved and submitted by June 1st. But in reality, we need to have a few things moving already, wheels moving, because some of these could be utilized this summer. And so we have done some initial steps. We could certainly halt and pause if necessary, but we are moving in the directions which we can. There's opportunity, again, to use this through August of 2022, so we have 2 summers to consider and the next school year in this funding. And I'll address it a little bit more, but I'd like to get Dr. Seha to step through the first half a dozen slides or so.
President Freitas, Dr. Washer, members of the board. I'll be reviewing the first 8 slides, which are our executive summary for the expanded learning opportunity grant presentation. On this second slide, you'll see an explanation of what the ELO grant is. It's one-time funding to address, some of the learning loss, social emotional circumstances as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And really, in the grant language, it encourages us to partner with outside agencies, to work with our existing staff to provide additional services to our students. On the next slide, on slide 3, you'll see the 7 allowable uses. Number one, we can extend instructional learning time by extending the school day or providing intersession or summer school. Number two, we can accelerate learning by providing tutoring. Number three, we can provide integrated pupil learning supports such as social emotional learning supports or health or school meals. Four, we can work with some of our school sites or outside agencies to establish community learning hubs. Number five, we can provide supports for credit deficient students. Number six, we can provide additional academic services to diagnose student learning, do some progress monitoring or benchmark assessments, and the last allowable use is training for school staff on social emotional learning or trauma-informed practices. On the next slide, you'll see the funding levels. We have $17.9 million for the 7 allowable uses. There is also an additional $1.9 million carved out for paraprofessionals, so that $1.9 million needs to be used to partner with paraprofessionals to provide additional supports. And then the last bullet on this page, we are receiving $10,000 per homeless student currently enrolled in Lodi Unified School District. We have 180 students that are currently enrolled who are classified as homeless, so we're receiving $100,000. Next slide. So part of the requirements of this grant was to gather stakeholder feedback. You can see here we met with employee groups. We had a combined employee group meeting just because of the short time frame to gather the feedback and present that to our school board. You can see here some of the feedback from the various employee groups. There was clear support for tutoring and enrichment opportunities, support for 2-week summer school at the elementary and middle school level, of course continuing the high school summer school efforts as well. Also, there was support for professional development for social emotional learning and instructional strategies. And then the last bullet on this slide is offering 0 and 7th periods at the high school level. We also met with some of our community members, and some of their feedback was similar to the employee group input. They would like to see after-school tutoring and enrichment opportunities, social, emotional, and educational opportunities as well. One of the areas that they identified was looking at, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead a slide. There was also support for providing programs that support social emotional learning needs. Next slide. So our recommendation is to look at the 7 allowable uses, as Dr. Solly mentioned, providing professional development opportunities in social emotional learning and instructional strategies, looking at after-school tutoring and enrichment, providing intersession social emotional learning and educational support opportunities, exploring partnerships with outside agencies to provide after-school tutoring, social emotional learning supports, educational supports, and enrichment opportunities. Also expand summer social emotional learning and educational support opportunities. And the last item would be to offer additional sections at the secondary level to help with credit recovery. Next slide. Oh wait, can you go back one slide? I think there was a time frame slide, or did we? Oh, it's at the end. So on the next slide, here are some possible partnerships that we can expand. These are some of the agencies that we currently have partnerships with. We can use some of this funding to expand the existing partnerships. You can see on here, we currently provide some mentoring and tutoring with Improve Your Tomorrow. We also provide mental health supports, educational supports, and summer school through Point Quest. The after-school program, Jose Maciel's office partners with the Table and YMCA and Lodi Parks and Rec to provide after-school enrichment and tutoring. We currently partner with JIM Enterprises to provide some parent English learner classes. In speaking with this organization recently, they mention that they also offer reading and math tutoring that we could partner with them to provide to our students. As you know, we partner with the Silicon Valley Education Foundation to offer Elevate math and coding programs, so we could look at expanding some of those efforts. And then the last one is inclusion films. We could look at partnering with this agency to provide special education enrichment opportunities. And this is not an exhaustive list, but these are just some of the examples of partnerships that we currently have in place that we could expand using this additional one-time funding. Right. And then as far as the time frame goes, we do need to have an approved plan by June 1st, 2021. So we bring this item for your consideration. It is also on the agenda as a consent item should the board choose to approve the plan tonight. And then as far as the time frame for funding ability, we have funds must be expended by August 31st, 2022, which would cover this summer, the 21-22 school year, and the summer of 22 as well. I think that's the last slide, right? If you could go to the next slide. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Dr.
Yeah.
Seha. If I may add, the actual grant itself is in the attachment as well, but the language that was used was that we will pursue actions in each of the allowable categories. We put some examples of partnerships up there, but we don't have those yet. We can't pursue those until we have an approved plan. But those were some of the community groups and partners we've worked with before, so they're not specifically named in the plan, but we are addressing that we are seeking these options. It also states the district will add days or minutes to the instructional calendar as is allowable under current or future bargaining agreements. Our current bargaining agreement isn't set up for that, so we won't be pursuing that at this time. Other steps, the district will support credit deficient students in a variety of credit recovery options. We have some of that currently in our summer school, in fact, which is about to launch, and so we're looking for options to continue that and expand those opportunities beyond summer school and in larger numbers, hopefully next summer. Hopefully we don't need as much, but we certainly may. Professional development will focus on social and emotional needs as well as academic needs. And so this was written really to not name specifically this is what we're going to do, or that's what we're going to do, but we are pursuing every option that makes sense for our students and under staffing allocations and contracts. The piece again that was mentioned before, this is a subset of the funding we have available to us. There's a deadline on this. We have additional funding coming. There's a fourth CARES settlement at the federal level. We'll have even more. We don't know yet. Just this past weekend, the governor announced a plan. It's only a plan at this point. The plan to spend $20 billion of state funds on school efforts. Many of those get to your point, Mr. Neely, of being very creative. And if you've read that, he's outlining, to your point, additional services to, I think the term they use is vulnerable student populations, some of which would be smaller class sizes or such. But that, again, many of those things that he mentioned were bargainable, not only for our district, but 1,000 other districts in the state. But all that aside, we are getting a lot of funding streams, which is sort of confusing some of this discussion around Lcap and this plan. We just have to be cognizant to pay attention to deadlines for the use of these funds. We have funding available now with strings on how to use it. We have need now, and we could pursue services now, knowing there's a deadline on the horizon. And for ESSER funds currently, that's August or September 2023. So we could start into action some steps requiring staffing or contracts, but we have to know that at some point at that deadline, we have to do, really I see three options. We can seek other funding sources within our Lcap to to continue those, but that would require cuts within our LCAP also, because the fund, that LCAP has to remain balanced. We could potentially see more funding coming from other streams, which has happened now more than once, which may or may not materialize down the road. Or we could simply reduce those contracts and those positions. So those are some options, but we can get creative to a point, knowing that we have those timelines to face, and if we're willing to bring on additional contracts and staffing, and money doesn't materialize, are we willing to reduce those positions as well? Or, as I mentioned, move things around in the LCAP, but when you move things around the LCAP, something gets reduced. So I only address that because this is ballpark $20 million. We've got many more millions of dollars to spend, and really to spend this best, we need to look at large bites of expenditures, which require all staff for the most part, or multiple schools. When we have a summer initiative going on, I mentioned last time starting this coding program. It's just a small, several $1,000s. It won't but scratch the surface here. And even larger programs with a couple $1 million, in reality, that's scratching the surface. So this is really important, the plan here, and it can be a seed for other steps along the way. So I guess I only mention that really because there's been confusion about the funding streams. This only addresses AB 86 funding and only a portion of it. So I guess maybe I'm going on too long, but time for your questions.
Dr. Solly, we can never get enough of you and your insight and wisdom, so it's always greatly appreciated. My understanding, though, today is that, again, we're still writing this with expanded learning opportunity grant and broad principles. And what we don't want to do is shut the door to anything, and approving this tonight would be approving broad principles for the board to take further action going forward.
That's correct, President Freitas. We've named no specific consultants or committed no specific staffing requirements of such. So it's very broad. So that, and again, maybe next December something pops up and it'd be a great idea. We've got this written so that it will fall within one of the 7 allowables, and we can grab that opportunity.
Very nice. Much appreciated. Much appreciated for this presentation. Much appreciated your hard work. Comments from the board?
Mr. Freitas, I think they've covered this thoroughly. They have some things to do, like Dr. Sally said, you know, they haven't got the grants yet or the money. So it's our responsibility as a board to get this thing going.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Nava. Other comments from the board? Mr. Knackstand?
Yeah, that's so much work. Thanks. One of the things I was kind of curious about that I didn't see mentioned, could this money be used to eliminate combo classes?
Well, it's not really intended to provide additional current bell-to-bell staffing. The vast majority of the funds are earmarked, as the title implies, expended beyond the normal day and year. There are some services noted here that are in support of SEL and such, and struggling students, but it's not really intended to address that directly. It could potentially address it indirectly in some ways.
It looks like on the report you had that there was not a big appetite from either their staff, teachers, or the public to extend the school year. And as far as I am right now, I kind of get that. I'm concerned there might be, a lot of burnout right now. This has been a tough year, actually 2 years for us. So I'm not sure. I would not want to eliminate that because I know this is a plan and it's just a possibility. But I could see where that might not be. I'm not sure. I don't think that might be one of the better ways to go. what I'm looking at are things like, we haven't been able to do some things like, we haven't probably had people in a welding class because we can't, because of social distancing and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of stuff would be included in this, you think?
Steps to address COVID-related issues are allowable.
Okay. I love the way you say that, because that's all open to everything, yeah.
Yeah, and also to your point of there isn't a strong appetite. People are justifiably tired of this COVID experience.
Yeah.
But remember, this covers through the next summer as well. So that's why we don't necessarily want to close the door on that.
Yeah.
Because potentially next summer they'll be a little more welcoming in some
Absolutely, we
areas.
want to keep our options open. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you, Mr. Grant. Other questions from the board? Mr. Porter?
Thank you for the report. When you say offer 0 to 7th periods at the high school level, would that be just one-off, two-off, or is that something you want to see current? I mean, forever?
Well, no, that would fall within the parameters of a really extended day.
Correct.
And so that could end. It could be utilized at some sites and not others. It's not a all-in necessarily requirement, where extending the year is more of an all-in. You can't extend the year for 2 schools and not out the rest. But a 7th period technically and actually is after school, while 0 period comes before school. It's after school activity.
We do offer 0 period in some schools now anyway, right? I was just curious if that was something that we could start and then continue at the high school level so kids can take more electives and so forth and just add a little diversity. Thank you very much for your report.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Ms. McFarland?
Thank you. I love the broadness of this. I would also be a component of not extending the school day off the table. It's not probably my first choice. I think children are in school enough. I think it's the quality of what we do within bell-to-bell schedule. And I would love to see the before and after being almost come to life, and therefore the extending the school day would not be necessary. That's my personal opinion. I would also like to see under which one was it? I gotta make sure I put it in the right. I don't see anything with support animals. I don't see anything with art. I don't see anything with music, and that probably falls under that last, to be determined. But I would like to think of some modalities in the social and emotional, or even in the form of extracurricular classes outside the box a little bit. Things maybe that we can't hit during the day. But maybe we've heard of someone local or even an outside agency, or teachers that have our teachers that have a passion that would like to do something different. It's just my idea of thinking, but I think you guys are in the right range. I like the more staff, the more one-to-one ratio we can get with students before and after. I love those ideas. And so I think you're on the right track. Thank you for the work. I can't imagine how many nights, days, weekends, like everybody, teachers, custodians, us, everybody's burning in at both ends, so thank you again to your staff.
Yeah, it's kind of like doing a thesis over and over and over again. I know we were all kind of happy when they were done the first time. So very nice, Vice President McFarland. Thank you. Mr. Haverly?
Thank you. First of all, I like your way of thinking in that it is in broad strokes, so that it does keep things flexible and changeable, which is good, because like you said, some things may come up, it may not be good right now, but we can develop it for the next time. As you said, it's 2 summers and 1 school year, so that's kind of nice. That being said, keeping an eye on the timeline, is it possible, spending money-wise, that when we're partnering with, let's say, Agency A to help with math tutoring or help with after-school latchkey homework kind of thing, could we get a contract
that is for multiple years and pay it before the deadline in order to stretch it out a little bit past the deadline year. I know
Pay advance.
it's kind of sneaky, but you're paying in advance for services that would last longer instead of one and done, you know. It would be nice to be able to, if it's a good idea, let's do it as many years as we can.
I may defer a little bit the technicality of that with Mr. Khan, but I would state again that there's potential, if we plan this out properly, that there may be another funding source to pick it up. Like I said, ESSER goes till 2023, at least at this point. There is some discussion about an amendment that could extend it another year, or again, if there's a fourth wave of these funds, who knows when that deadline might be. But so if we plan it right, potentially another funding source could pick it up as this one sunsets.
Thank you.
That's a good point, Mr. Everly, but if it's that good of an idea, this board is going to find a way to make it happen. So, and we got world's greatest money man over here that's definitely going to make this thing happen. So, but, Mr. Neely, no pressure, but he is our favorite. So.
First of all, gentlemen, thank you very much for your report. It's great. A couple questions on it. First of all, let's talk about the surveys. How many participants were in that survey?
Well, there's actually, I think we provided a couple examples. There was the meetings that these occurred. I'm going from memory here, which is scary, but I think there were roughly 19 or 20, 21 folks at the community meeting, which was sort of all come. The staff meeting, I remember, was closer to 50. And then we did the survey. The survey, that when it was closed, there were 532, well, here it is right here, 532 responses. And so that mostly, I would say, over probably 55% were teachers, staff, some administrators, and then about a third of it community, and then a collection of other categories.
We did get a lot of turnout. We're talking about 28,000 students. Okay. Right. There's a lot of funding sources. You alluded to that. That are coming in. I believe roughly it's going to be about $130 million, isn't it, Mr. Khan? 120. What's 10 million? All right, let's use 120. And this is only 20 million here. I'm concerned that that with all the other duties that the people right here have is managing that extra. And I'm wondering if some of those funds couldn't be used to hire somebody in a temporary position in order to manage those funds. Somebody who would keep track of all these things, make sure we don't miss any deadlines and all that, while the rest of you continue to make this the finest school district in Northern California. Possibly all of them.
It already is.
What's that?
It already is.
Yeah, I said continue to make it.
Okay,
Continue to make it.
So what do you think about that, Dr. Sullivan? Mr. Khan,
About this being the best district? I'm on board.
10-4. What about hiring a expanded learning opportunity grant director?
Well, I don't know that it would necessarily come out of this allocation, but there are other funding sources that I think could support this. This really is targeting indirect support of students, which that's more of an indirect support. But like I say, I think we have some other funding opportunities that we could probably tap into.
And the reason I'm asking this is I believe that the money spent on that position would more than return itself on making sure that we don't lose money, or that there are additional opportunities out there that we can get it. And then they would lay the groundwork, document all this, and then when that money's gone, then some of these programs we can continue. You also, you talked about, well, extending instructional learning time. That doesn't necessarily mean more days in school for everybody, correct?
Well, like I addressed earlier, the extended year idea is intended to be all schools would extend their year. Expanded opportunities outside of the day can vary.
Well, it says it's extending instructional learning time by providing summer school. Checks that box. Right. Also the intercessional. And I truly believe that there are many of our parents, especially in our lower income, who would welcome additional opportunities for their children to go to school during the breaks. Now, that doesn't necessarily, I mean, we would of course offer it to our teachers first, but it doesn't have to be completely performed by our teachers. There are other ways that we can do that. I think that we need to look into that as well. We talked about community schools earlier, and as a matter of fact, you and I had a conversation about the governor's plan on this. And keep in mind, this is just a plan. Like he had a plan in February or January that never materialized either. Okay, so this is just a plan right now. But he's talking about focusing on some of these basic needs and bringing in more people. I think that we should take a look at that with some of this money, because I believe it would be appropriate for this program. If we could get these relationships going, like Dr. Sales was talking about, and then it could go beyond, because you're also going to do it with nonprofits, you're going to do it with county government agencies, you're going to do all of that. So if we can establish those and use the money now, then maybe we can keep that going and have an impact in the long term. Also, I think that the state government right now is looking at TK for everyone. And that's one of the issues that I learned about this weekend. There was a little bit, I mean, I know kindergarten isn't even mandatory, but they're talking about making TK mandatory. That's kind of an interesting concept. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but maybe we could start something on that as well, to get a head start on that. And again, I want to thank you guys for everything you've done on this. You've got a lot of work ahead of you. It's going to be a tough time coming up to maximize these resources. It's one of the keys to success, is to maximize your resources. So we've got to do this. So thank you very much. That's all I've got. Thanks.
Very good comments. Thank you, Mr. Neal. Any other additional comments from the board? Comments from the public? Ellery?
I have Brenda Dalen-Torrey.
I actually signed up online because I thought I needed to do it for years. Is that okay?
That is perfect.
I was like worried I wasn't getting a meeting, so good evening. Thanks
Hi,
for
Brenda.
having me. How are you?
Very good. Welcome to the meeting.
Good. I have just a couple of questions. So you allocated $6.6 million to spend to add additional minutes or days to our kids' school year. Yet from community, teachers, and everyone, you had weak support. I don't understand why we're allocating such a large amount to something that we've had weak support from the 500 people who actually did the survey, which is disappointing on their end. So I don't know why we're allocating so much of that, and if we are allocating $6.6 million, can that be moved to a different category at this time, so late in the game?
Dr. Sully?
The allocations are preliminary. They ultimately aren't set in stone. They can be moved. However, as we mentioned earlier, if we have the opportunity next summer for an extended summer school, we have to have some allocations in that bucket, and this would cover the majority of that if we happen to have that occur. Again, if we don't have that occur, then yes, we would need to shift that funding to another service.
And I think it's what they're trying to say is they're building in flexibility.
Gotcha, which is understandable. So then we talked about children's health being a main thing, children's social emotional health, single parent homes. kids not getting to eat at home, yet you only allocated $562,000 to that. Why such a small allocation to that, which had such a large response from the surveys that were sent in, yet you allocated a bunch of money towards something that had weak support?
Well, I believe the extended days and minutes would, if implemented, would secure large chunks of money. And while those actions are extremely important, typically they wouldn't expend as large of amount in comparison proportionally. So again, those could be adjusted based upon other factors that come into play. But the big bites come when you have all schools, all classes doing some service, as opposed to supporting that effort, which might not necessarily be at all schools, or potentially impacting every student, where an extended year would impact every student. So it was an estimate and a target, and we could certainly adjust depending upon how things play out.
Okay, one last question, I won't take up your time. The current plan is a total of $19.9 million is what you have set aside. Yet, what I read is 10% of that is supposed to go to your paraprofessionals. So the plan should be $17.9 million and then 1 point something going to your paras. Is that correct, or am I reading it wrong?
Well, on slide 4 of our executive summary, we did have that delineated 1.9 million for paraprofessionals. The reason you don't see it in the budgeting is that some of the services would include both paraprofessionals and others. For example, an extended day, we would, if we were doing that, we would certainly hope to have use of the paraprofessionals as well as the teachers, so it's lumped together in that.
I wasn't understanding it, so I wanted to make sure that that 1.9 is going to those paras because they're a huge part of your school district. And they're well, you know, they do their jobs, they do them well, and they're well underserved. Also, I hope that this plan can help with some intervention teachers, K through 3rd. That's huge. It's a huge thing. So are we looking at how we can get an intervention teacher in every school site? Not just our Title I's. You know, they need our help. I get that. But in every school site, we should have an intervention teacher that can help these kids learn to read, deal with their social emotional, especially that K through 3. I mean, that's a huge thing to have an intervention teacher at all of these schools. And then also making sure to keep our classroom sizes small. Spoke with a Tokay High ag teacher today. Her program currently has 35 plus students per classroom. One of my students is going there, she'll start there her freshman year, and they're having to cut kids from their ag program. That's huge. Why are we doing that? Why are we not funding these programs, these ag programs, these welding programs, mechanics? Not everyone's going to grow up and be a college-bound person. But if you get these kids to work with their hands, it's going to be great. There's no reason we should be having to mark kids off of a list. So that's it.
Thank you, Brenda.
All right, thank you.
Good questions.
That's great.
And I wasn't swinging the gavel at you, I was
No,
swinging
you're
it,
okay.
my monitor keeps going up, and it likes to go out about every 3 minutes, so.
You're all right, thank you.
I got a quick question before she starts.
Sure. Mr. Connexon?
So this is just a plan, and if we decide, ask this, some program, and we decide not to do it, then we just give the money back, right?
Well, unless we can allocate it somewhere else before the deadline.
Okay, but I mean, it's, so the idea is to get as much money as we possibly can get, and then use it, hopefully, for what we say, but if we don't, if there's, the whole world decides, oh, that's a really bad idea, we just give the money back.
Correct, and even to the greater point, the $120 million that was mentioned earlier, we would love to spend that all well.
Sure.
If we can't, whatever,
Yeah.
we give it back.
Okay, so, okay, it seems obvious to me, we try.
Spend wisely.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Michelle?
Thank you. Agreed, Mr. Connexon. One, first, if I can reiterate, thank you, Dr. Sully and Dr. Seha, for the meeting. We know that it was short notice from the introduction of this grant and getting input from all employee groups and our public. We do know that, you know, looking at that 500 number, that seems very low to us also. And with this as being a broad, there's lots of great things that are in here that I think specific suggestions could come forward from school sites, school site council on ideas. I hope that we re-ask, and maybe that's site-specific, looking at their data numbers, how can we improve the reading in our K-3, what do we need, and bringing back those suggestions to you. I also am concerned about making sure that we have parent input and surveys to those parents that are not on our website, that do not answer the Blackboard messages, that we go old school snail mail, you know, bring it back. Now that they're on campus, we can send it home with Johnny in his backpack, and, you know, mom knows to look for it, fill it out, and send it back. You know, my kids brought back papers, you know, when I recognize that they've brought back that information from their parents. So we would just ask again, as we go forward, to look at these broad strokes, and can we get more input from the public and from your bargaining units? And we do think that, you know, we recognize, as the previous speaker pointed out, the paraprofessionals, we need to make sure that we are spending the money on these people to do this extended time. As everybody knows, it's been a long year, and you've recognized burnout and tired. But before we go to outside partnerships, that we go internally. I heard today from 2 teachers, they never got the summer school invite to apply and found out the deadline passed. So a better way to communicate and advertise that, I don't know how exactly to do that, but somehow it's not getting to every teacher that wanted to do it. So if we can open that up more to give you some specifics, I think school sites would like to bring down those graphs that we saw earlier to address the situations to bridge those deficiencies. And thank you for the hard work and the initial opportunity. We hope we get to give some more input on this. Thank you.
Very nice, thank you, Michelle. Very good. Okay, and we're going to go 3 minutes each on these, so. Lisa, are you there?
She's self-muted at the moment.
Lisa, do you know how to unmute yourself?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear. Very good.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I don't know if you guys can hear me, because it's hard to tell. I'm just going to tell you that listening to the board from home has been difficult. The sound is not great with the owl, so you might want to think about doing something different next time.
That's a good idea. That's really
I appreciate the opportunity. I did attend the one of the teacher meetings, and there were some great suggestions from teachers. One of the things I want to say is, instead of going to some of these outside agencies, why are you not looking at teachers to do expanded opportunities where we integrate things like performing arts and STEAM? And at the same time, we teach kids the ELA and the math skills that go along with it. For example, bring back MESA at school sites and use MESA as a tool to teach kids not only about STEM, but also we integrate the language arts and the math. Girls Who Code. Coding has its own syntax, just like language. And there's math involved as well. Support things like this that teachers can do after school as enrichment, but also gives these students the support that they need in language arts and math. Performing arts. Do all these kinds of things that kids want to do that will engage them. And have, instead of having outside agencies, offer teachers the ability or the opportunity, I should say, to have these kinds of endeavors. Has that been discussed at all?
Yes, it is.
Lisa, do you have any more? Okay, Lisa has left the meeting. Who's next, Doug?
Maria Smith.
Hi, Maria.
Hello, good evening, Dr. Washer, President Freitas, and board members. My name is Maria Smith, and I teach at John Muir Elementary. I want to begin by saying thank you for finally settling our 2019-2020 contract. It's a shame that it took about 2 years for you to do the right thing, but we are thankful you finally did. In addition to being thankful, we are tired. Tired of long days, tired of more work, and tired of unrealistic expectations. Yet, here we are again. More money is being dangled in front of you by the state, and you are eager to add more to our plate. You are talking about extending our workday and school year, despite the fact that when you survey teachers and parents, the majority did not want either of these options. You want to help bridge the learning gap? How about you do what's best for students and dissolve the combo classes that are slated at many sites next year? Or what about funding extracurricular activities that can be educational, challenging, and available to interested students? Let's not forget that this is a change in our contract and must be negotiated. Yet here you are seriously discussing this kind or before having any kind of talk with teachers. I am sure you understand why we are having a hard time trusting that you will do what's right given our recent history. Please listen to the people you surveyed. We need time to rest and get ready for another school year. We don't need longer days and more of them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Maria. Valerie, who's next?
Rose Ortiz.
Hi, Rose, you there?
I do not see Rose on the list.
Okay, if we find Rose later, we'll come on back to her. How's that sound?
Kimberly Freeberg.
Hi, Kimberly.
Good evening, President Freitas, members of the board, and Superintendent Washer. If you're not pursuing the additional minutes and days this school year, then why is it on the other attachment on page 3? It states, the district will add days or minutes to the instructional calendar as it is allowable under the current and future bargaining agreements. This is something that needs to be bargained, and let's be honest, the track record of the bargaining in good faith is long gone, as well as the trust. I attended the staff input meeting where I know the consensus was after school support and smaller class sizes for summer school, which is one of the allowable uses. I also learned from that meeting it cannot be used for salaries, so expecting us to work longer and no additional pay, we are already overworked as it is, and now let's add more to extend the year. Bringing this up as an action item without sharing the full survey results construes the narrative. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Valerie, we have one more.
Our last comment is Linda Alvarez.
Linda, you there?
She's not present.
All right. That concludes the comments on the item. What are the wishes of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the expanded learning opportunity grant. Well, it's already discussed, the action item is back next.
All right, and I would have some minutes.
Well, sorry about that.
Is it someone who hasn't spoken already? Brenda?
I'm good.
Brenda's good. Thanks, Brenda.
Unless you want me to talk, I'm good at it. Sure?
You know what, right after we adjourn, we'll hear you for a long time. How's that sound? I think very early on that we said that this was a report and an action item, that this was blended. So I don't think we're. I was wearing a mask and I mumbled. So anyhow, all right. So we have a motion on item OAI1, which is the Expand Learning Opportunity Grant from Mr. Nava. We have a second, Mr. McFarland, Mr. Knackstead.
Who is not present?
It's not that late yet. It's not that late.
We have a second from Mr. Nava and a second from Mr. Knackstead, a motion from Mr. Nava. We will go ahead and call for the vote.
Before we vote, can I ask a question?
Yes.
We are voting to move forward to learn more about this. We are not voting at the entirety as they were presented, correct? This is to move forward. The potential of all the things that you presented. This is not firm that we are moving forward on.
One or the other.
Are you talking about the list that we have?
The laundry list and the action, because I would like to avoid 6,000 emails tomorrow about how horrible I am that we approved extended school day when that is on the table and has not been approved.
Correct. We are asking for the opportunities for these various services.
As they arise and become desired by our stakeholders.
Yes. Make sure
moving
we're all
forward.
clear and the public is clear.
And we're making sure that we leave no stone unturned should the needs arise for any of these. Because we are writing this as broadly as possible.
Thank you so much.
All right, so that is what we are voting on to proceed on. So go ahead and I am not on this agenda item, but I am now, so go ahead and call for the vote. I started in the Ducks chair, come on.
It worked once.
I am on item 11. I can do a voice vote. I like the voice votes.
I know you do it so well.
We're all in.
That is why. I've been to the meeting 3 times. This is why Michael is a technician extraordinaire. So if you came over here, you can get it. And the Expanded Learning Opportunity Grant passes 7-0. Thank you.
This does not mean we are extending the school day.
This does not mean
that the school day is coming.
School days will be extended effective immediately. Vacations will be canceled, so, all right. Our next meeting. Well, let me bring up one item. Well, our next meeting is June 1st, right?
Correct.
And we've been talking about the problems that we've been having with DL. I also do see we have another meeting on the 15th.
Correct.
Which is when we no longer have masks and there's state restrictions.
Tears will away.
And the tiers will go away. So we can.
which tiers.
So would it be the wishes of the board that on 15th we return to a all in-person meeting and no more hybrid? Or can we do that on the 1st?
I vote first.
And does the law allow us to have only a person meeting on the 1st?
Yes, you do not have to continue with the virtual, it would be limited seating at that point still. So that would be.
You gotta give opportunity. You gotta give everybody opportunity. One more time, because then it's gone, right?
Yeah.
And the Neely hybrid meeting will be done after June 1st.
I don't know. I mean, the opportunity is here now to come or to stay home, and some, I'd say.
My suggestion would be to do one more.
How many attendees do we have at this meeting tonight?
Online, approximately 50.
They're having trouble hearing.
All right. Yeah, we could seat 50.
No.
We could not see 50.
Or you could put them.
There's your answer.
3 seats. That's,
Yeah, why not just go ahead? We know how to do it.
I agree that we should do the first, the same way we're doing it now.
Right.
Oh, these difficult things. Let's do what's right with the law.
One more.
So we will do one more meeting on the 1st, which in the Neely hybrid model. And then, and as of June 15th, we will return full time.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I'll be here on the.
Yes, Mr. Nava?
Yeah, I'd like to acknowledge that tomorrow, May 19th, is Mr. Heberly's birthday.
I thought I was gonna get away with
Not for me, but.
Nothing gets past that.
You were this close, and we drug you back in. So, Mr. Nava, would you like to lead us in a round of happy birthday for Mr. Everly?
All right, there you go.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mr. Everly. Happy birthday to you.
Birthdays are a
What's
good
up?
thing.
Any other comments from the board? In that case, we stand adjourned. Very nice meeting. Thank you.
Hey guys, could you set these Chromebooks so that the screen doesn't go
Yeah.
by?
Carpal tunnel.